Australia is home to the world's oldest astronomers. Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people have been custodians of this land for over 60,000 years and possess tens of thousands of years worth of scientific and cultural knowledge. Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders have relied on the night sky throughout the existence of time. However, the human relationship with space has changed. What we call space technologies now support our everyday lives, and the global space sector is rapidly growing. Australia also has a space sector with over 600 organisations across the country, and in 2018, the Australia's very own space agency was born. The Australian Space Agency are partnering with Teabba to tell you about space and what opportunities there are for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, businesses and communities. In the first of our series, we'll explore our mob's ongoing relationship with the skies, how our relationship with space has changed, but how our use of space continues to support our everyday lives. You'll also hear from the head of the Australian Space Agency, Enrico Palermo, as he explains what the space is, what the space sector is, and what it does. So, welcome to the first episode, Space 101.
Welcome to the first episode of our series with the Australian Space Agency. In this episode, we're going to celebrate Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people as the first astronomers and explore how our relationship with space has changed. We'll also hear from a special guest who will talk to us about what the space sector is and how we use space technologies every day without realising it. Over the past 60,000 years, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people have used the night sky as a repository for traditional knowledge systems. Our sky stories have been used to pass this knowledge on, helping us to understand who we are and guiding our relationship with country. First Nations people have also relied on stars for navigation and to inform seasonal practices such as hunting. This rich history of astronomical knowledge is why Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people are considered the world's first astronomers. This deep scientific understanding of the cosmos is something that is gaining more recognition, and the agency is exploring how we might be able to incorporate this knowledge into a uniquely Australian approach to space. But what is the space sector, and who are the Australian Space Agency? It is safe to say our relationship with space has changed considerably. We have been fascinated by space for generations, but in the 1950s, our relationship with space changed forever when the first rocket carrying a satellite was launched into space by the Russian Space Agency. A rocket is a type of vehicle that uses jet propulsion to accelerate and is how we get objects and humans into outer space. Think an aeroplane for space, but much more complex. The satellite that was on board this rocket was called Sputnik, which was the first ever satellite to be launched into space. A satellite is an object in space that circles around a bigger object, such as the Earth, what we call an orbit. Satellites provide a range of space technologies, including taking photos of the planet, providing communications on Earth, helping us forecast weather, and providing us with important scientific information. Sputnik, for example, provided scientists with key information on the Earth's atmosphere so we could better our understanding of it. After Sputnik was launched in the 1950s, the United States and Russia entered into what was called the space race, where each nation competed against the other for superiority in space technologies and space exploration. The space race culminated in the Apollo 11 mission, which saw the first human land on the surface of the moon. That person was Neil Armstrong. In the decades since the moon landing, space technologies have continued to develop to the point that we now use them daily for things such as GPS, communications, or predicting the weather. There are also hundreds of companies across Australia developing these technologies and finding new ways to use space. To learn more about space technologies and the space sector, I caught up with Enrico Palermo, the head of the Australian Space Agency. How else can space technology benefit First Nations people, and particularly in the remote communities?
Yeah, so obviously we've touched on a big one with
connectivity and
connectivity, and that's, can support things such as remote medicine. It supports emergency services, identifying where they may need to, provide help or assistance to communities. Navigation, can assist the navigation around our vast continent using GPS and satellite navigation capabilities. Weather forecasting, one of the impacts of climate change is more extreme weather events, and, the Bureau of Meteorology rely on quite a large number of satellites to better predict heavy rainstorms or periods of drought, which, are important for communities to understand. All of that information relies on space technology. And then one I always don't want to forget is the inspiration aspect of space. I think it's in all of our DNA, you could say, to be explorers and wonder about the cosmos and the stories it tells us. And we can't forget about that. It's also what space offers us through astronomy, through science and discovery.
Well, we used to say sky's the limit. Now space is the limit.
That's right. That's right.
There's so much to learn out there, and there's so many opportunities for people. And I'd also like to mention, with the connectivity as well, it makes it easier for people to be able to still be out on country and work as well. Being able to connect with the rest of the world. They might need to do training. They might be, doing filming, making movies out there, and they need to send large files and stuff like that. There's just so many different things. Connectivity as well can help out in the communities.
Yeah, and exactly, and you've hit on a good point. I mean, I'll talk about a recent example. So another spaceport in Australia, not on the north end, but on the south side in Teabba, which is not far from Ceduna here in South Australia. Southern Launch has developed, a spaceport on land. And earlier this year, we had a German company launch a rocket, German company called High Impulse. And there was a beautiful piece on the ABC and commentary from the CEO of the Teabba Aboriginal Community Corporation about how these launch activities have created jobs and really diverse jobs, and has really lifted the gaze of the community on what's possible in these communities, the opportunities that will come from this sector for remote communities as well. So that was a great collaboration between Southern Launch and the Teabba Aboriginal Community Corporation. I would love to see similar cooperations and activities and job growth and investment in these communities to come through space launch as we head into the future.
What is the role of the Australian Space Agency?
Yeah, so the Australian Space Agency, we are headquartered here in Adelaide, South Australia, but we have a national remit to really work on how Australia can continue to access all the benefits from space. And so there's sort of 5 key areas we work on for government. The first is a coordinating role. Space is so prevalent through all of society, but also government agencies. The Australian Space Agency has a leadership role to bring together those government agencies and make sure we're coordinated, and we provide policy advice to government. And one of the policy areas we're working on right now, for example, is the sustainability of space activities. And so policy coordination, leadership across government is our first role. The second one is we shape and help build the capability, the techniques, the systems that Australia needs to ensure it benefits from access to space. And so we've funded over 70 projects around the nation that are developing new technologies for space. They've invested in facilities such as the control centre here in Adelaide we talked about. And there's also some quite inspirational missions like our rover to the moon. And so later this decade, we will see an Australian design rover, which is called Rover, to go to the moon. So that's one of the Space Agency's program. And from an inspiration perspective, that kids at school now know, look what Australia's doing. We're sending, our ingenuity to the surface of the moon in this new phase of space exploration that is part of the Artemis program, which is a follow-on or the sister to Apollo. The third area is international. So space is very much a international team sport. And one of the key reasons the agency formed was to be that, you could say, front door to the world. So how do we collaborate with NASA or the European Space Agency or other space agencies in the region, such as the New Zealand Space Agency or the Japanese Space Agency. So we manage all those bilateral and relationships with partners internationally, and it's a key part of what we do, and we negotiate agreements with governments, such as one recently was called the Technology Safeguards Agreement, or TSA. And this TSA agreement will allow US companies to bring their rockets and satellites to Australia, for example. The fourth area out of the five is promoting and ensuring we do this responsibly. So we do this responsibly in regard to protecting country, but also protecting sky country as part of that as well. And so we do that in a few ways. We are the regulator. So if you or any of your listeners want to develop a rocket or develop a spaceport in Australia, you would apply to the Australian Space Agency to get a permit or a license. So we administer that under a domestic act, and it also ensures we have various obligations internationally under what are called space treaties that we also have to ensure the Australian government, Australian entities sort of comply with. So we do that through our regulatory role. And then the fifth and very important role is an inspiration role. We know that space provides that spark of curiosity that can capture the attention of the world and have people think about what are their opportunities in science, technology, engineering and math. And if you look at the way the world responded to some of those first images from the James Webb Space Telescope a couple of years ago, or when the rovers landed on Mars, Perseverance recently, that can all stimulate discussion in science and discovery and really uplift all parts of the community. So there are our five functions. That's what we do for government, and we've got a great team based here in Adelaide and Canberra predominantly, but around the nation that are committed to those goals. So
last question we have is, how can First Nations people find out more about opportunities in the space sector?
Yeah, so I mentioned if you're in Adelaide, encourage you to visit the Australian Space Discovery Centre. We also have a great virtual resources on our website, which is our website is space, so space.gov.au, where there's materials and our programs and case studies about how we use space today in Australian society. We also have a First Nations engagement team at the Space Agency, and I know they would warmly welcome any questions from your listeners. So I'll read out their email address to you, John, but it's First Nations Engagement, First Nations Engagement at space.gov.au, and they can explain things like our internship to the NASA Jet Propulsion Laboratory and some of our other initiatives.
Excellent.
It's been great to have a yarn today with you, John. We know we've got a lot to learn still and a lot to offer and help benefit Australia's First Nations community and remote communities as we really boost Australia's contribution to the global space economy and exploration and science.
Definitely. I'm very excited to see what the future offers in this partnership with the Australian Space Agency and all of the great stuff that we can achieve together out there with First Nations people.
Thanks, John. We really appreciated the chat today.
Thank you very much, Enrico Palermo, head of the Australian Space Agency. Our relationship with space has changed significantly over the last 60 to 70,000 years. But what hasn't changed is the importance that space plays in our everyday lives. Space technologies provide us with services such as GPS on our phones, satellite communications in remote areas, weather forecasting, and a bunch of other stuff. In the next episode, we'll hear more about the different ways we can use space technology and the benefits they provide, and why space matters. If you want to find out more about space, visit the Australian Space Agency's website and they have a bunch of resources you can check out. We'll put their link up on our socials.